Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Meseches Beitzah Daf Tes Zayin begins with some Agadata discussions touching on the topics of how our money for the year is fixed in Rosh Hashanah, what is outside of that calculation of how much fixed amount of earnings we will have. Also subjects of Shabbos, preparing for Shabbos, caring for Shabbos, and giving people gifts without letting them know that you're giving it to them. The later part of the daf will then go back to the halachas of Erev Tavshilin, discussing how much you could use Erev Tavshilin, what type of cooked dish you can use for Erev Tavshilin, what happens if you forgot to make an Erev Tavshilin, how far does your Erev Tavshilin work, and some other topics. So let's begin. The daf, we're starting in the last few words on Daf Tetzvav. The Gemara says that Rav Tachlifa, the brother of Rabbanai Chazai, said that a person's income is fixed, it's decreed for him from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Now, there's another famous version of this Gemara that says from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. That means everything that you are going to earn from one Rosh Hashanah all the way throughout the year until the next is fixed on that Rosh Hashanah. This version says that between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is when the decree for the entire year is made. But everything is included in this decree except for his expenses for Shabbos, Yom Tov, and teaching Torah to his children. There, whatever extra he spends, he will get that back. That'll be returned to him. That's not part of the fixed amount that he has. Now, what's the source for this? Because the Torah says a pasuk referring to Rosh Hashanah and a pasuk referring to food, one following the other. It says, Tiku b'chod hashofar b'kas aliyam chageinu. Tiku b'chod hashofar, blow on the month, which we say is the first of the month, blow the shofar. How do you know that that's the first of the month? Because it's b'kas aliyam chageinu, which we interpret as Kisa, when it's covered, when the moon is covered on the day of our holiday. So the moon covered, what day is it that the moon is covered? That's Rosh Chodesh, which is Rosh Hashanah. It's the only Yom Tov which is on Rosh Chodesh, where the moon is hidden and it's not visible in all parts of the world. Now, the following pasuk says, Ki chayk liYisraelu mishpat lelekei Yaakov. The Gemara is interpreting the word chayk here as meaning food. Food is determined for Yisrael. It's judged for all of Yaakov. Now, the Gemara says, how do you know that the word chayk means food? The Gemara says two sources. V'achlu es chukam. In Mitzrayim, it says that the Kohanim didn't need to buy food from Paro because he gave them a stipend for their food. Also, the pasuk of Hashifeni lechem chuki, the pasuk in Mishlei where lechem chuki also refers to food. Now the Gemara brings the famous customs of Shammai, Zaken, and Hillel, how they set themselves up for Shabbos. So Shammai would eat the entire week of the covered Shabbos. If he found something that was nice, he would save it for Shabbos. And if he found something nicer than that, he would eat the first one and keep the second one for Shabbos. Therefore, by eating the first one, he was innately leaving over the second one, and that eating that he was doing was part of saving the covered Shabbos. And therefore, he was preparing for Shabbos the entire week. Hillel did it differently. He just relied that Hashem was going to send him something. Erev Shabbos, he would send him something beautiful for Shabbos. He had that special level of bitachon where you could just rely on Hashem and you'll get what you need just when you need it. Now, Hillel agreed that Shammai's way had the Maila, had the benefit of preparing for Shabbos all week, but he wanted to try to exercise an extra level of bitachon, which is not fitting for everybody, but Hillel felt that he could, and therefore he did. Now, psukim that support each of them. Hillel's is Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Hashem will bless Hashem every day for what he gives you each day for that day. And Shammai was Chad Shovecha L'Shabbosecha, from the first of the week, from Sunday already be preparing for Shabbos. Now, Chama Rabbi Chanina says somebody who gives a gift to his friend does not have to inform him that he gave him a gift. Like it says that Moshe's skin of his face shone, and he didn't know. Hashem did not inform him that he had given him that gift that he shone. So I asked that this contradicts the pasuk where Hashem was giving the gift of Shabbos, and he said to Moshe, I have a special treasure in my treasure house. It's called Shabbos. I want to give it to Klal Yisrael. Go tell them. And Shimon ben Gamliel said, based on that, you see that if you give food to a child, you have to let his parents know. You have to inform them that you did them a favor by feeding their child. So how come we're saying here that you don't have to inform somebody where you give them a gift? So Gemara says it depends if it's the type of gift which will be revealed in the end anyway. If it's going to be revealed in the end anyway, you'll find out about the gift. You don't have to say anything. However, if it's not going to be revealed, then you should inform them. So Gemara says, but Shabbos was going to be revealed. So why did we have to inform them about Shabbos? The Gemara says the halachos of Shabbos would be revealed, but the reward of Shabbos would not necessarily be revealed, and that's what he wanted them to be informed about. Now the Gemara analyzes the statement of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel: if you give bread to a child, you should inform his mother. What sign should you make so that his mother knows that you fed him? So the Gemara says you should rub his skin with oil so that he shines, and put a little eye makeup on him. The Gemara says during the time when there was witchcraft, and part of that witchcraft included rubbing people with oil. If somebody finds that his kid was rubbed with oil, he'll be a little suspicious about it, therefore he shouldn't do that. Instead, just put some of that food that you gave him on him so that he will have indicated on him that he was fed and he was given food. Now, the Gemara quotes all the mitzvahs which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Klal Yisrael, he gave them in public so everybody could see, except for Shabbos. Shabbos was given privately. Like it says, it is a special sign between me and Klal Yisrael. It's hidden between us, between Hashem and the Jewish people. So Gemara says, if so, then why do we have a Gemara that says that in the future, in the ultimate redemption, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will hold the nations of the world accountable for not keeping mitzvahs? But they didn't know about Shabbos. How could they be accountable for that? So Gemara gives a couple of answers here. The Gemara says either they knew about the mitzvah, but the reward is they didn't know about. That's what is hidden, like we said earlier about the reward of Shabbos. Or the Gemara says maybe the thing that's hidden is the idea of the neshama yisera, the extra soul. People who keep Shabbos are given an extra soul. Rashi says to help them be calm and relaxed and participate fully in the Shabbos experience. And the Gemara quotes a pasuk that says Shabbos vayinafash, that when Shabbos leaves, people are vay nefesh. They lost their soul. They lost the extra soul. And therefore we see that they had an extra soul, an extra nefesh, a Shabbos nefesh, over Shabbos. The Gemara now returns to the halachos of an Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin, again, is food that you set aside to use for Shabbos, which is following Yom Tov. And by beginning to set food aside for the Shabbos that follows the Yom Tov, you're now allowed to cook over Yom Tov because you've begun the cooking process. You've begun the preparation, and therefore you're keeping an eye on Shabbos and Yom Tov to make sure that they are both equally accounted for, and you will not underserve one. So Gemara says, but it's got to be, when you set aside this food, it has to be a cooked dish and not a baked dish. And the Gemara wants to know why. The Gemara is going to offer two reasons, and we'll have two versions of this Gemara, which reason we accept based on comparing it to another factor. So again, the halacha we've said is that it has to be a cooked dish and not bread. So Gemara says, why not bread? So Gemara first wants to say because bread doesn't go with bread. It's got to be some dish that goes with bread. The reason for that is you want something extra, something special, and therefore it has to be something that you eat together with bread. But you don't need bread with bread. Bread is not a companion to bread itself. That makes no sense. So the Gemara says, so that's the one reason. The other potential reason is that it should be something which is rare, something which is uncommon. And by having something rare and uncommon, you'll again show that you're setting something aside special for Shabbos, and you won't forget about Shabbos, which is after Yom Tov. Now, according to the first, we'll be comparing now bread to oatmeal, like a crushed grain type of dish that people ate. The daisa, it's called. So, according to the first version of this Gemara, you could use the daisa for an erev. That means that the daisa is different than bread. So, if the reason that bread is no good is because it's not something that goes together with bread, so we have a problem. Because bread doesn't go with bread, but also you don't view the daisa as an accompaniment to bread. The Gemara even quotes Rabbi Zeru, who says that a person who eats bread with the daisa is a Babylonian fool. So, just like bread doesn't go with bread, the daisa doesn't go with bread, you shouldn't be able to use either of them for an erev. So the Gemara therefore says another reason has to be because it's not common. You need something which is uncommon. Bread is a common food and doesn't show anything special for Shabbos. The daisa is uncommon and does show something special for Shabbos. Now the other version of this Gemara is that the reason is that we're looking for something uncommon. The Gemara's question then is why can you not use the daisa? You should be able to use the daisa also. It's also uncommon. The Gemara therefore says it's not the reason. The reason is not because of uncommon. The reason is because you need something that goes together with bread, and the daisa doesn't go together with a bread. So According to this version, you cannot use the daisa. We're looking for a reason which explains why you can't use bread or daisa, and the reason would be that you need something which is eaten together with bread and the daisa are not eaten together with bread. Again, like Rabbi Zera said, it takes a Babylonian fool to eat bread together with the daisa, which is the same as bread and bread. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to other types of things you could use for the Erev Tafshilin. So the Gemara says that Chia taught that you're allowed to use the beans left in the bottom of a pot. That's enough. The Gemara says it's got to be that there's a kazayas of them, because the minimum size is a kazayas, the size of an olive. Rav Yitzchak says you're allowed to use the fat that's stuck on a knife. You could scratch that off and use that again as long as it's a kazayas worth. The Gemara says Ravasi says you could use small salted fish. The Gemara says that those small salted fish have no Isser Bishul Akum. And the reason is that Bishul Akum, the prohibition which the Chazal made against eating food cooked by a Nachri, that prohibition is only on food which cannot be eaten raw. If it could be eaten raw, then there's no significance to the cooking. Now, these salted fish are edible in their salted state without being cooked, and therefore it's okay. So Gemara says you could use the small salted fish, you don't have to worry even if they were cooked by Nachar. So Gemara says that, and if a Nachri went and he roasted them, you could use them for an Erev Tavshilin. The Gemara says that if he made them into kasa daharsana, then it's asr. Now kasa daharsana is where you take it and you mix it with fish oil and flour. So there, it's not eaten raw because there's flour involved in there. So Gemara says, well, obviously then, you cannot have it be cooked by a nachri, because then, since it's not eaten raw, it would have an isser of bishul akum. So Gemara says you may think that the flour is not a significant part of it, and therefore we're not going to pay attention to the flour. The fish oil is the main part, and that is edible raw. Gemara says therefore the chiddush over here is that the flour part is considered to be a significant main part of it. Now the Gemara quotes the size of an Erev Tavshilin. Rabbi Abba says it's got to be at least a kizayis. Gemara said kizayis, one kizayis for everybody involved, or you need a kizayis for each person that this Erev Tavshilin is meant to be working for. The Gemara quotes a proof of Rabbi Abba and the of Rav that one kizayis works for everybody, whether it's for one person or even for 100 people. Now, we had said the minimum size is a kazayas. The Gemara has two questions on this. The Gemara first brings a Mishnah that says that if the Erev Tavshilin was lost or eaten, you're allowed to continue to cook for Shabbos on Yom Tov based on that Erev Tavshilin as long as there was a kol shehu left. Kol shehu means any amount. So the Gemara says you see that you only need any amount, you don't need a kazayas. The Gemara says no, kol shehu means here a kazayas. It means at least a kazayas. Next, the Gemara brings a proof from a Beitzah that says that it's a roasted food. The Erev Tavshilin could be a roasted food, a soaked food, a cooked food, an overcooked food, or even Spanish mackerel, which is fish which is cooked very lightly, and that's all it needs. That you just poured hot water on it on a Yom Tov, and that's enough to cook it. Now, this is the beginning of the cooking process. End of the cooking process makes no difference. There is no minimum size, it says. So now this is our key point. It says no minimum size. So how can we say that it requires at least a kazayas? Versus it means that there's no, when we say the words exactly aren't minimum size, the words are no size. It doesn't mean minimum size, it means there's no maximum size. There is no limit to how big you can make it. You can make this Erev Tavshilin food as big as you want. There is a minimum size, however, and that is a kazayas. Okay, the Gemara now goes into the topic of, do people have to know about the Erev Chatzeres? Does it only work if you know that the Erev Chatzeres is Erev Tavshilin? Does it only work if you know that the Erev Tavshilin has been set up? So Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, you have to know about it. So the Gemara says the person who's making it certainly has to know that he's setting it aside for an Erev Tavshilin. Otherwise it's not Erev Tavshilin at all. The question is, what about other people that he's doing it for them? Does it work or not? So Gemara says, yeah, they don't have to know about it. Shmuel's father made an Erev Tavshilin for the entire city of Narada. Rav Ravasi made an Erev Tavshilin for the entire city of Tveria. So you see, the people there didn't have to know that there was an Erev made on their behalf. Now, on a similar note, the Gemara brings some stories here. The Gemara says that Rav Yaakov Bar Idi used to call out somebody if they got to make an Erev should rely on mine. I had him in mine and mine. And how far does that go? So Rav Nechumi Bar Zechariah says, name of Abaye, as far as Tchum Shabbos, anyone within the Tchum Shabbos of the person who made the Erev Tavshilin can rely on that Erev Tavshilin, not somebody outside that Tchum Shabbos. The Gemara says there was a blind man who used to teach, he would say over Bryces to Shmuel, And one day Shmuel saw that he was very sad. He said, "Why are you sad?" And he said, "I forgot to make Erev Tavshilin." So he said, "Okay, you can rely on mine. I had you in mind for mine. I had everybody in mind for mine." Now, the next year, he saw that he was sad again. He said, "Why are you sad?" He said, "Again, I forgot to make Erev Tavshilin." He said, "No, so this time you can't use mine. You're a posheya, you were negligent, you should have learned from your last mistake, and therefore you can't rely on mine. Everybody else could, but not you." The Gemara now turns briefly to the topic of Erev Tchumin and Erev Chatzeres that you want to make on Yom Tov. So again, we're talking about Yom Tov that fell on a Friday, so it's Yom Tov immediately followed by Shabbos. And before Shabbos, you have to have an Erev Tchumin sometimes. You want to be able to extend your Tchum larger than the minimum Tchum Shabbos, the distance you're allowed to walk on Shabbos. So that has to be set up before Shabbos. You also want to have an Erev Chatzeres to combine different courtyards into one that you should be allowed to carry within them. These have to be done before Shabbos. The question is here, before Shabbos is Yom Tov. You're allowed to do them in Yom Tov. So you're certainly not allowed to do, the Gemara says, you're not allowed to do an Erev Tchumin, because an Erev Tchumin you need before Yom Tov also. So you can't do an Erev Tchumin on Yom Tov for the Shabbos that comes afterwards. Erev Tchumin is something that's required before Yom Tov. The question is about an Erev Chatzeres. Erev Chatzeres is something that's supposed to permit you to carry. Permitting you to carry, it's not also to carry on Yom Tov. For the most part, anything which is L'tzarech Yom Tov, you're allowed to carry on Yom Tov. So you don't need an Erev Chatzeres on Yom Tov. So the question is, could I make an Erev Chatzeres on Yom Tov for the Shabbos that comes afterwards, since I don't need it now? So Gemara quotes the Machlokes. We have a Bryce that says it's a Machlokes between Rebbe and the Tanakama. Tanakama says you're not allowed to make an Erev Chatzeres. Rebbe says you are allowed to make an Erev Chatzeres, so Rebbe goes leniently. Amar Roim. So the Gemara says that Rav says the halacha is like the Tanakama, strictly, and Shmuel says that the halacha is like Rebbe, leniently. Then the Gemara asks a strange thing. The Gemara says the halacha is like Rebbe. What does Shmuel say? The halacha is like Rebbe, leniently or strictly? The Gemara says, what do you mean? Obviously, Rebbe said the lenient opinion is that you're allowed to make an Erev Chatzeres on Yom Tov for Shabbos that comes afterwards. The Gemara says, no, there's a different version of this price that has the opinion switched. And we know that Shmuel paskin like Rebbe, but which version of Rebbe? The one in which he was lenient, the one in which he was strict. So the Gemara says a proof to you that it's the one in which he was lenient, because Rav's comment on this halacha that Shmuel said was one of the first halachas that he said when he became in a position. So the Gemara said, so Rav said he's messing things up, he's making a kilkul, he's destroying things with this halacha. So Gemara says that if he's destroying things, obviously he's giving a lenient psak. Then you could say he's destroying things. He's allowing you to do something which should be usher, so that's destructive. So Gemara says no. Maybe he's saying that it's usher to make the Erev Chatzeres. He's destroying things because now you're not going to have an Erev Chatzeres that people are going to end up carrying without one. That's what he means. So he's ruling strictly you can't make an Erev Chatzeres, but that winds up destroying things by having people not have an Erev Chatzeres. So Gemara says our final determination on this is that Rav said name of Chizda, name of Huna, the halacha is like Rebbe, and that it is Aser. Rebbe is strict, and Rebbe rules that it is forbidden to make this Erev Chatzeres on Yom Tov for Shabbos.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.